Welcome to Let's Get Writing. I'm your host, Kathryn Taylor. Let's Get Writing is available each week on my Facebook page, Kathryn Taylor Media, and the shows are permanently hosted on my YouTube channel at Kathryn Taylor TV. And of course, they're also available as podcasts on Podbean. And if you like your enjoyment on the go, that's the perfect solution for you. I certainly love your feedback and appreciate your comments and ideas, so please continue to share them. My guest today on Let's Get Writing is originally from Gilmore, Ontario. He received a Master of Arts in Creative Writing from the University of Toronto and a doctorate in Atlantic Canadian Literature from Memorial University right here in Newfoundland. And he is currently teaching creative writing at a high school in Iowa. Of course, that's a very straightforward path. Ontario, Newfoundland, Iowa, lots of fun. And we're going to dig into that today. He is the author of the story collection, This Ramshackle Tabernacle, and the novel, A Blessed Snarl, and has just published his most recent book, When the Dead Are Raised, with Slant Books in Eugene, Oregon. I want you to meet my guest. I'm going to bring him to the screen, and I would love to do that, but he's disappeared. Somewhere he's gone. We may have to wait for him to come back, and he seems to be back. Wonderful. Samuel, we're going to show you in the screen. Hi, Sam Martin. Where did you go?
I don't know. I was watching the show, and all of a sudden, it kind of went dark over here. So I'm glad to be back.
You are back, and I'm glad to have you back. And it's a real pleasure to be speaking with you. And I when I first was introduced to you, what caught my attention so much, other than the fact that you are a writer, is the fact that you have this affiliation with Newfoundland. In fact, you describe yourself as a come from away. And, and you did. You came from Ontario and moved here. And it's quite often the other direction that people go to Ontario. Whatever happened to you? Tell us the story of how you ended up in Newfoundland.
Well, I'd done a master's in creative writing at the University of Toronto. I got a chance to work with David Adams Richards. So I was reading East Coast literature, and was finding that on my bookshelf, although it started out as like Atlantic Canada very broadly, it quickly became like a shelf of Newfoundland literature. And so being somebody who really loved school, loved being in the classroom, thought, well, why not spend 4 more years in school and kind of delay the quote unquote real world. And so I was looking for a good doctorate program, but one where I could study the literature that I was enamored of at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking at a few places, few scholars that specialized in it, and Memorial just seemed like kind of the one obvious school to put in the mix. And when I was talking with Deneen Farquharson, who was heading up the graduate program at that time, she was saying, who are you interested in writing? I started to list Michael Crummy, Lisa Moore, Michael Winter, Kenneth J. Harvey. And so I said, do you think I could study those people if I came and worked in your program? She said, well, we can probably set you up with meeting those people. And I'm like, okay, well, I think that's it. That's the program. And so my wife Samantha and I, we packed up our dog, loaded our stuff on a truck, and drove out here. Drove into St. John's in the fogs, which I thought was a great place, great way to meet the city. There was no romancing it. This is the weather here.
Right.
And we squatted in our apartment for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then found out that the moving truck hauling our earthly goods caught fire, never left Ontario. And so people in the graduate program kind of made it possible for us to live in Newfoundland. They kind of helped us furnish our apartment. The Byrne brothers came out of retirement as a folk duo and did a special concert for us. And we just felt so moved and embraced by the community. There was probably several weeks where we were thinking we should just turn tail and run. Like this turned out to be a bad adventure, but we were so embraced by the community, both at the university and downtown, and the writing community. We thought, well, no, actually, this is where we want to be for as long as we can. And so we kind of settled down and said St. John's is going to be home until the next adventure comes, or until we have to leave.
That's a pretty nice story. I would think when you found out that all your things were burned before, never did leave Ontario, you'd be like, is this an ominous sign?
Yes.
But obviously the community embraced you and welcomed you, and that has, I think, that affection you have for Newfoundland runs quite deep.
Mm-hmm.
Your books are set in Newfoundland. Are they not all set in Newfoundland?
The first one was because I wrote that one at the University of Toronto, and that was kind of trying to find a way to write about my home community as somebody who'd chosen to move away. And it was kind of a reckoning with the religious tradition that I'd grown up with, and a lot of the things that questions I wanted to ask. And so I tried to ask those in stories. They wound up being quite dark stories. Those got picked up by Breakwater, a Newfoundland publisher, and they said they would just wanted to publish the collection. And then the second book that I gave to them that they published was set in Newfoundland at the time. So yeah, first book Ontario, second book was set in Newfoundland, and then this third one I started writing before we left Newfoundland. And it's been an 8, almost 9-year process of working through multiple drafts to try to make sure I was staying true to the place, but also keeping up on how the place was changing when I wasn't there. Like, what changes has Newfoundland gone through in the last decade? So I've been trying to keep that in mind and to try to keep the feel of the story very, very contemporary, very in the moment.
Right. And I mean, Newfoundland is a place that is in constant change, yet not.
Right. Yeah.
That's a tricky one, because there are so many traditions and our roots run deep in many, many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, of course, life intervenes with that. So yeah, that's interesting. So you're doing it all the way from Iowa, and there you are teaching, and you are inspiring future writers. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I've taught creative writing at the undergraduate level for a while now, for about 8 years. And I found that interesting because all of the creative writing classes that I had been in, I was surrounded by people that were intent on becoming writers. And then for the first time moving here, I had people taking creative writing kind of recreationally, like, oh, I'm kind of interested, but I don't know if I want to be a writer. And so I kind of had to adjust the way that I thought about a creative writing class. So the one I was going to be teaching would be different than any of the ones I'd taken, because I wanted the students to come to some realization that they had a story to tell, that they could find the joy in creative writing, in trying to tell a story. And it was a bit of a trick for me to think about the students in front of me. They were there for a credit, but weren't necessarily there to become writers. And how could I get them interested in something they weren't necessarily innately interested in? And how could I make them feel like they were capable of doing something that they hadn't entertained the possibility that this is something they could do? So that 8 years at that level was a good, helpful transition, because the next step to teaching in high school just takes that much further. A lot of my students have no idea what they want to do, but it's also a little more fun because they they're very upfront about the kind of books that they like, and they're very honest about the kind of books they do not like. So that creates a really interesting dynamic in the class. So sometimes I have them read something and they're like, we just find this so boring. And I'm like, well, bring me in something that you find really compelling and we'll study it. And I can find a way to teach them writing skills based on, content or things that they're more interested in. And that's kind of broadened my sense of what's out there in terms of the literary world. I have my tastes. I have, authors who are continual favorites. Everything that they put out, everything Lisa Moore publishes, I'm going to read, right? Anything Michael Crummy publishes, I'm going to read. So I have those people who I follow kind of religiously, but my students have their authors too. Mm-hmm. And when we get talking about that in the table and they start to see, oh, this is how you build a story, or this is what a scene can look like. There comes a point, and it's kind of different for each of them, but kind of where a door opens and they kind of get it. Mm-hmm. One of them was, we have one of the exercises is called How to Strangle a Cat, and other advice on writing stories. And I say, imagine that you're a thief, you're in a closet, and the people come home, but their cat has crawled into your bag in the closet and starts to cry. How do we keep the scene interesting, and what can you tell me about your thief? And every one of them creates a different thief. They all have different cats. They all have different closets. And that they can start building a story from there. One student today, she's like, it finally clicked for her because she has a cat. She loves this cat and was trying to think, so what if somebody was in my house and was like, my cat? And all of a sudden you just saw like a light come on. She's like, oh, this can be fun. And I can explore what would I do if somebody wound up in my life, in my house, and was kind of violating all of those borders. How would I respond, and who would this person be? And it was just really interesting to see that unfold in real time, and then try to say, so now we're going to start putting it on the page, one step at a time.
Well, they're very fortunate to have you there to light the way. And I recall back in school how much I loved English, but it was, in great part to the teachers who inspired me, that made me want to write and read. And so they're very fortunate to have that. I think at one point, did you not also introduce a course in Newfoundland literature down there somewhere?
I did. I was trying to think of like a theoretical frame for it. And so I'd come across this book by Richard Kearney called Strangers, Gods, and Monsters. And so I called the course Strangers, Gods, and Monsters, Contemporary Newfoundland Literature. Because I was in Iowa, none of the students had any idea what or where Newfoundland was. They didn't read the subtitle. They all showed up thinking that it was a course in fantasy literature about strangers, gods, and actual monsters. And they told me, because it was a night class, so I had 2.5 hours with them, and they said it was, you convinced us by the end of the class to stay in the course for the whole semester. Because they told me in the first few minutes, they're like, this is not the course we thought it was, and most of us are thinking about dropping it. And I'm like, give me 2 hours to try to pitch Newfoundland literature to you, and then see what you think. And so it was just, it might have been like the best thing to not have an audience of people who are like, yes, no, I love this. I think this is great. This is amazing. And everyone's complete skeptic. And again, that kind of set the stage for being a teacher here and talking about Canadian literature, Newfoundland literature, or talking to writers who don't like writing. So that was, I'm like, how do I get people to fall in love with something that I spent years falling in love with? And I've spent 4 years studying, and I've spent 4 years living there. How can I get people to fall in love with this place and this literature in under 2 hours? And so it seemed to work. They all stayed. They all stayed for the whole course.
Wow. You're our ambassador for our authors, and who knows what will come out of this. That would make a great short story. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book and When the Dead Are Raised, and let people know a little bit about that. A mystery thriller. I think, right, in saying that that's something that you very much enjoy. Tell us a little bit about the book and the process of writing it.
All right. Well, the book centers on a character named Teffy Byrne, who steals a dead sex worker's coded journal from a local art show in St. John's. She thinks it might shed light on an unsolved murder committed 7 years prior. The victim is named Teresa Squires, who happens to be Teffy's boyfriend, Jer's ex.
Always a good situation.
Yeah. So Teffy has to wind up putting Teresa's journal aside because Troy Hopper, Jer's former drug boss, gets out of Her Majesty's Penitentiary and tries to contact Jer, but through Teffy. And so an attempt to protect Jer quickly gets out of hand, and Teffy finds herself stranded on an island with a pound of Troy's heroin smuggled inside a dead woman's urn, and the dead woman's daughter wants to scatter her mother's ashes at sea. And so Teffy has to get the drugs back, to get Jer back to safety, and yet she still has this journal that she's trying to keep track of as well. And so that becomes the premise on which the rest of the story turns.
Yeah, and there's a lot in there. I was reading it and I was like, okay, these characters are very like, they are not privileged people. I mean, they're living close to the edge and doing different things and pretty raw. So, you know, you create not superheroes. I mean, Teffy's no superhero by any means. She's really got to, you know, to fight to get where she gets and to survive through all this. So very interesting. And I wanted you to share a bit of the book with people so they could have a sense of your writing, if you wanted to share an excerpt. And then we'll talk a little more after that about the book and what you're doing and so on. How about that? Would you like to read a bit?
That sounds good.
Okay.
I can start with chapter 1 so as not to lose people with too many details and try to jump right into the action.
All right.
1 tequila, 2 tequila, 3 tequila floor, the dance floor. Mosh pit, really. The scuzz cuts thrashing their instruments on stage, ear bleedingly loud and record cut tight, beer splashing everywhere. Not a bad place to hide. Teffy shoulders into the hair-tossing crowd, boyfriend Jer in tow. It's Jer she's trying to hide, though he doesn't know it yet. And what would he do if he did? Order another round and start trashing himself defiant? Say, give me the number, Teffs, and I'll tell him where he can meet me? This is the Old West or something. She knows she can wear him down to halfway reasonable if she keeps him on the tequila and moshing all night. Hungover and wore out is the only way to approach this sort of conversation with him, really. Only way to tell him that Troy Hopper, his ex-boss and St. John's most notorious meth king, is out of Her Majesty's Penitentiary on early release and creep texting her on her work phone. Jer must know Troy is out. That shouldn't come as a shock. No, it's Troy texting that'll tick him off. Jer bumps up against her and she pulls him in with her hand in his back pocket, wonders what exactly Hopper is trying to start now that he's out. The rank dealer just served 6 years for arson and possession with the intent to distribute. Far cry from the murder charge Jer pressed for, but so things go. She's seen enough of the courts to know that. Jer leans in to kiss her, she thinks, but says he's going for more shots, and she yells, "Go on then," and shoves him off, the double kick drum frothing the crowd wild as the scuzz cuts break into the next song. Jer disappears toward the bar. Teffy starts headbanging, whipping her red hair wet as she works herself up to the pace of her Wing Chun sessions. Martial arts have made Masha strange comforts rather than panic attacks in the making. It's a relief to know that she can separate a guy's shoulder if she needs to. Loosens the knot in her neck as she jumps against the floor's stick, shirt slick as she throws herself at the singer's spit. Bring it on, come on, come on. Bring it on, come on, come on. Bring it on. And she does. telling herself to channel it, channel the fear, fight to make something of it, like she used to, when she'd wedge herself between the local gang of stump-faced homophobes and her best friend Finn, him the chopping block for blunt jokes about his sexuality, being the only openly gay kid in Placentia at the time. And what did he get for being himself? Hatchet job by zit-lipped morons, by his own dad. The bruises on his throat, why he started wearing those fancy neck scarves, a bit of personal flourish, he said. Keep people from asking the wrong questions. And to piss his dad off at the same time. Save some trouble, make some trouble, they'd say. Seeing those bruises, the way Finn winced when she touched his sides, made her want to make some trouble for his old man. You know what your dad deserves, she said. She falters now, drops the beat, lost a second in the recollection of Finn with blood on his hands in his father's stage. He locks eyes with her, wide eyes, screaming eyes, and she stumbles in the crowded bar, the knife still buried in his dad's chest, second-degree murder charge, steady thud, thud, thud. 3 years in custody for the blood on the floor. And the bruises? What about them? Deep bass, heartbeat, double kick drum, her pulse jacked, and Finn's dad limp at their feet. Last kick of his leg. Siren screaming like a soloed guitar. Go on, Finn yells. Go on. Strobing cherries, dance floor lights. Go on, someone yells. But it's not Finn. She's knocked some guy on the dance floor and he's telling her to get lost. Go on, he yells, thinking her a drunken mess. Her hair pasted to her sweaty face. She elbows past him and presses deeper into the throng, away from the angry prick, and the memory of Finn dragging after her like a net. They trucked him off to Her Majesty's in St. John's, and she followed him, studied journalism at the university so she could visit him every week, but she never managed to make a single visit. And why was that? Not one visit in his 3 years before being paroled, and now he's out in Corner Brook, 8 hours away and on the other side of the island, on the other side of the world for all she's seen. Start over, he wrote in a parting email. Bouncing, she sees Jer through the pasty-faced crowd, down by the bar and chatting it up, 6 shots by his splayed hands. He tosses one back, then another, tattooed arms gesturing, inked sleeves she's come to love, like she used to love getting drunk with Finn by the old military base in Argentia, spread-eagled on a cracked runway leading nowhere. Heads together, sharing an iPod, listening to grunge hop, like the band harshing the crowd now, Finn's face tequila hot and happy, familiar bottle rolling empty between them. To curb her drinking sense, she's turned to martial arts as a kind of therapy, calculated power shots against everyone that would ever make a sacred heart like Finn feel small. Never again, she thinks, thrashing herself livid on the floor, slamming the door on that bloody night. Never again, she screams into the music, the whole time running in her mind, running like her whole world is on fire. Bring it on, come on, come on. Bring it on, come on, come on. Bring it on. An arm tightens around her, rough hand squeezing her chest, a hot body presses into her, belt buckle thrust into her backside. She stomps down on the foot behind her, hears a sharp swear in her ear, and the arm around her chest loosens enough for her to elbow crack the jaw of the guy holding her. He staggers back a step, grabs her shirt's neckline and yanks. She hacks down on his arm as she pivots and punches his throat with her other hand. She's loose of him now, tight space between them. Chest punches him twice, sees his winded shock. Then his fist hammers down as she blocks the clumsy blow, grabs his shirt, yanks sharply, and kicks sideways through his bent kneecap. He drops. Eyes empty shot glasses. She steps back.
Lots of action in there. I've never been, this is an aside, I've never been in a mosh pit. I'm not sure that I'd ever want to be after listening to that. Holy smokes. Anyway, it goes on from there and takes in other areas of the island. And certainly, when you were writing the book and there's so much detail in there and so on, what was the process? How long did it take you? And what role did editing play in it?
Right. So I started writing the book on Fogo Island. I was there's their first writer in residence in their arts program, and was living and writing in Deep Bay. And so kind of shuttling back and forth between Deep Bay and Tilting and Jobat's Arm, I really wanted to write about a place like that. dealing with some of the issues that the island was dealing with, but I wanted to fictionalize it and move it out into kind of move it offshore into its own fictional world to create a kind of closed universe. But yeah, ask some questions about what it's like to be in a place that's changing so rapidly. What's it like to be in a place where people have fished for so long, that's created the rhythm and the culture of the place. And then, that this hotel is being built and there's an arts program. And so I kind of want, like, what would happen if something like that had like a dark underbelly to it? And what would it look like to try to explore that? And I really wanted to try to find a story that would bring urban St. John's together with the rural outport in a fast-paced story that would kind of stitch those two worlds together. Because a lot of the people I was getting to know were coming from either one of those worlds, but were often, sometimes it was a townie who had, found themselves out around the bay somewhere, or somebody from the bay who is now living in town. So I was really interested in that sense of displacement, even within the province, as well as kind of outside. I was coming in obviously as an outsider and feeling that in a particular way, but then realizing even people within the province and moving around because things change so quickly, that there could be that sense of displacement and a sense of, trying to struggle, trying to make a mark, sometimes just trying to hang on in a place or under circumstances where it can be really hard to hang on.
And you know what, you mentioned being on Fogo Island as one of the first writer in residences, and you also were shortlisted for the BMO Winterset and nominated for an International Dublin IMPAC. Did I say that right?
Yep.
That one I'm not familiar with. So, I mean, you have found recognition in your writing as well, which has been pretty phenomenal, and you continue to inspire people. Sam, I want to just let people know where they can reach out to you. Part of the purpose of this show is to introduce people, not answer all the questions, but to incite interest in your work and in you. So I have you at Twitter at Dark Art Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
They can find you there. And also you have a webpage, which I'd like to share now, samuelmartinauthor.com.
Mm-hmm.
And so reaching out to you, those would be two of the best ways for people to reach you?
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, they can find me on Instagram as well, Samuel_Martin. I think it might also, if you search Samuel Martin, you'll find me. I have my mug up there.
Okay, we've gotten a good look at you. But I want to thank you so much. I know I've kind of pulled you out of the classroom very rapidly today and onto the show, but I certainly appreciate you taking the time to share what you're doing and also to share your work with us and to let people know that they can get your book on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Amazon, right. Amazon.ca, or from the publisher directly.
Okay, which is Slant Books.
Slant Books, yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for your time. It seems so quick, and it always does, and we've certainly run out of it, but it's been a true pleasure to talk to you and get to know you better, and I wish you all the best. And
thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. And please do continue inspiring future writers.
I'll do my best. Thank you so much, Kathryn, for the invite.
Oh, you're very welcome. And have a wonderful day.